bloody Windows 10, man. Finish moving all of your settings into the settings thing already. This is a nightmare.
All of this is staying in, isn't it? I know you.
Maybe. Maybe not.
Right. I'm just going to let it be a dick, frankly.
I look forward to finding it hard to level your audio properly.
I mean, it'll still be better than last time, right?
I hope so.
Better than that struggle. Ugh. I love how I'm complaining when it was you that had to go through it.
I will say for the people, right, so Ryan's audio in the last episode was rubbish, quite frankly. Yeah, it was very hot and recordings crapped out, basically. So I had two versions of Ryan's audio. The high quality microphone for the first bit was fine, and then in my experience, when Ryan's recording's gone a bit wrong, it sort of like drops the odd word here and there, and I can just sort of fill it in with a backup recording, and it's tolerable. But with this one, it just went really wrong and just kept. If I kept cutting backwards and forwards between the backup recording and the real one, it would have been super distracting. And in hindsight, I wish I'd used the bad audio for the whole thing, because switching halfway through, I think, is rubbish as well. But by the time I realised that's what was going on, I was already a good hour and a half into the edit, and I couldn't be bothered to redo that.
I always tell people that you don't need fancy kit to do a good podcast. You could do it on your phone if you had to. But once you've gone quality, you can't go back.
You don't need fancy stuff to start, and I don't think you need particularly fancy stuff to carry on. But people are really, like, humans are more sensitive than you might realise to sound, and you can see this most with video. If you're making a video for anything, any reason, the most important part of that video is the audio. If you take a film and you make the audio crap, if you like really compress the audio so it just sounds like it's going through a telephone, it will be like hard to watch. Whereas if you keep crisp audio but re-encode the video at a super low bit rate, that's much more tolerable. Like, that's much less noticeable to people. So yeah, like, humans' hearing is pretty good, and we're pretty sensitive to it. So I think if you're doing anything like if you're doing anything involving audio for a long-term hobby, I think it is worth investing in a slightly better microphone than whatever's built into the computer you're on.
If only I could invest in a significantly better laptop. Because the mic is bloody wasted at this point.
I think in your case, yeah, a better computer would be the thing to do.
The main thing I felt last episode was just a huge amount of gratitude towards my laptop for not doing that during the Dave Moulds interview, because that would have killed me, I think. That
would have been horrendous.
And as I said that sentence, my audio just turned itself up again, which is just great. So then I pinked on the bit where I'm talking about how glad I am that things didn't go right. It's just, never make a podcast, kids. Don't do it.
Well, I'll do my best with your audio to make it sound reasonable. But if Ryan appears to sort of fade in and out like this every now and then know that it's that I did my best with it.
Know that it's Ryan's fault, not Sam's.
Know that it's Ryan's fault, and also know that I am not an audio engineer and therefore don't know everything about trying to make it sound better.
There we go. I was going to say waivers. That's not what's the word I'm looking for, where you make an excuse ahead of time.
I don't know.
Well, whatever it is, it's over.
Caveats over?
Not quite well. No. We could be here a long time trying to find this word. I vote we don't do that.
Seconded.
BattleBots has finally confirmed what we already knew, that they're filming in October.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to feel about it.
Well, if nothing else, it'll give us something to talk about that's not Retuncti, and that will be good for everyone.
Yeah, but it also means we've got to finish Retuncti, because I'm not doing it 2 seasons behind. Imagine the absolute agony of trying to do that.
Look, we've got a deadline now. So,
well, we haven't got an air date. An air date would be the deadline.
Well, we're closer to a deadline, and I don't know, I feel like we work slightly better with deadlines.
Only slightly, though, and I'm not sure slightly is enough.
No promises that we'll ever finish it, but we'll try.
I'm really worried about this season. Like, really worried about it.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit weird, I think.
No audience is kind of a given at this stage, which I think is going to be weird enough. But from all the information that we're hearing, it's going to be much lower on teams. And it's going to be lower on big teams as well.
It'll be really weird. I think that the lack of audience is one of those things that when I sort of first heard that, I was like, oh, that'd be fine. I can't imagine that'll make much of a difference. But I think it's one of those like subtle things that will probably have a much bigger impact than I'd initially have expected. But yeah, the lack of teams will be weird for much more obvious reasons.
In a way, the difference it's going to make to the field is quite exciting to me. Because if you take away a lot of the big players, then someone's got to come up in their place. And I think that could be extremely interesting. I think there are lots of robots that would previously have been on the edge of the top 16 that could be looking at sort of semi-final places. We could very easily get a winner that we would never have seen coming in a normal season. And in that respect, it really excites me. But I'm more worried about what your average Joe talking about the show on Facebook is going to do if they find that all their big favourite robots X, Y, and Z aren't there. They then start spouting off about how crap it is and what Discovery do when they look at that. Because while people like us exist as people who really love the show and people who will find the positives in it being done differently this time, we have to recognise that we're a really small subsection of the audience. And if a half-baked series switches a lot of casual viewers off, what are Discovery going to do with that? Will they be nice and understanding that, oh, production had to change significantly, this is just going to happen? Or are they going to go, well, you've had your chance? I hope it's the former, but I don't know.
Yeah, I really hope that they recognise that the ratings will be different and probably lower and don't cancel it based on that. Although I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I'd be very sad. And I wonder if they can I wonder if there's something that the production team can do to counter that in the way that it's presented, and make it clear this is different. This is a different way of doing BattleBots because of current events. If they try and pass it off as this is what we always meant to do, I think that would be really bad for the long-term sort of side of BattleBots. Whereas I think if they're a bit more honest about the way that they got to make it this time, hopefully that means the audience will be more forgiving. Me, with my dim view on humanity, I suspect they won't be more forgiving, but I'd hope they'd be more forgiving. And I hope that Discovery realise that, and I hope that Discovery don't make too many rash decisions based on this season.
I should point out that the way I see it, it's perfectly possible that in terms of viewership, this season could do better than ever. Because the competition it's going to be up against will be different. You know, a lot of TV things have had their production schedules completely obliterated. Live sport isn't necessarily as much as a thing. There are ways to pitch this and spin this and ways that people could react where it could become a bigger thing than it normally is. That is a possibility. I don't want to act like this is definitely going to be bad. And I think they will make something that we will enjoy. As you say, it's just a question of how they try to pitch it. What I would really like to see is this sort of become the BattleBots equivalent of a series of Robot Wars Extreme. Without any of the things that actually happened in that, because Robot Wars Extreme was awful. But that idea of this is kind of a series within a series. This isn't the main competition. This is a different thing. It runs differently. It's still us, but it's not like last time and it's not like next time will be. I think that idea of, even just renaming it slightly will manage expectations a lot better. Yeah,
I think they've just got to frame it right in everything they do.
And I'll tell you what, if they add fake crowd noise, I will be livid. Because I have had to watch a lot of football matches with fake crowd noise, and it is one of the worst things I have ever experienced. And considering the quality of their sound design last season, it probably wouldn't even be done that well.
Have you ever watched a football match without crowd noises at all?
I'm an Oxford City fan. That's all of our matches.
Okay. Because, the only reason I ask that is because it's while fake added crowd noises might be bad, it's entirely possible that no crowd noises is worse.
No. Not for me. Commentary covers up the lack of crowd noise in a football match. And in BattleBots, we don't hear that much of the crowd noise anyway in a fight. when we have the sort of raw cuts, it's the commentary that I find myself missing.
Yeah.
No, fake crowd noise. It's just it's an immersion breaker. That's what it is. When you hear a crowd but don't see a crowd. It's just wrong on so many levels, and I find it incredibly annoying.
Well, let's hope they don't do it.
Fight music is the answer. Bring back fight music. Why not?
I don't know. I feel like fight music would change the feel of it quite a lot. Maybe that's what you'd want. I don't know. It's tricky.
Again, set it apart from the normal series.
Yeah, I can completely see sort of both sides of that argument. Like on the one hand, it's like, well, let's do everything we can to set it apart and make it different. But then at some point, it's like, well, is this still battle bots? I don't know. I think there's a balance there.
For me, as long as it's still robot combat, I'm happy. But I realise that's not going to be representative of the main audience.
Fingers crossed it's good.
Yeah, we don't know who's involved yet. There are well-sourced rumours of certain robots taking part or not taking part. And if those rumours prove to be true, I think there will be a lot of people saying that winning this season basically doesn't count.
It'll count. It'll count.
I just think it could always have that shadow over it. Anyway, I don't want to get bogged down in being negative about this too much, because I am, overall, looking forward to having something to watch.
Oh man, I'm going to have to move to America again to watch it. What a nightmare.
I mean, 2-week quarantine every time we do now as well. It's going to be hard work for us.
There will be no weekly schedule.
All these teams having to do that. Get out. We're the real victims here. Never forget it. At least flights might be cheaper, though.
Yeah. Man, I finally got my refund from a flight that was cancelled right at the beginning of all this.
Oh, wow.
Oh, dear. It took a long time. 2 months, maybe, before I saw that money again.
I mean, I'm almost surprised that you've got it.
So am I. I wasn't really expecting to in the end. Like it was from like a cheap airline, and it was one of those deals where it was very easy to get like a voucher for some other time in the future, but very hard to get actual money out of them. So it was like, oh, you could just click this button on our website and we'll just send you a thing. It'll be easy and done, and that's it. Whereas if you want to receive a refund, you've got to phone customer support. And I was like, oh, here we go. So I phoned customer support, and it was always like, oh, helplines are completely full. Please phone back later. And then it just hung up on me. And that happened every day for like a week when I could be bothered. And then eventually there was a way of like filling in some online form, which I did and sent off into the ether, and received a reply being like, we're processing your request. Don't email us again for 90 days. Oh dear. But anyway, I got it back.
Can't believe you didn't want a voucher for an airline that may or may not exist by the time you want to fly.
I know, yeah. For all I know, it'll be gone. I don't know.
Anyway, sticking with the topic of things that were badly affected by current events. Actually, I'm not going to say badly. I think just affected for this one. I think this was a true neutral for me, which is RoboNerd.
RoboNerd was really weird. Right, I want to be really clear. RoboNerd this year was good. It was really good. But I really missed going to Wolverhampton.
Sentences no one has ever said before.
Yeah, no, but I really did miss actually going and seeing people and being there. I think it was sort of the first of these sort of social not the first, because there have been weddings that I've missed, which I've missed as well.
I was going to say, there was quite a big one ages before. Although I'm glad you got your priorities straight.
I know what's up, but no, it was just funny. Like it was a lot of the time when things have been cancelled, there's been a part of me that's like quite glad, because I'm a bit of a recluse. But with this one, yeah, I really missed it. I really missed going there and seeing all the stuff that people had built and meeting people and being able to sort of chat with people and stuff. So it was a shame. However, Virtual RoboNerd was also really good. I really enjoyed the live stream. I thought it was really well done.
I feel like we lost something but also gained something. So I would have loved for the real event to be happening. I'd have loved to have gone and seen people. I'd love to have gone and seen people. We had quite a few plans of things that we might have done while we were there that would have been brilliant. We could have pissed around with robots, which is basically what we all want anyway, and that would have been brilliant. But I don't think this would ever have been a thing without it being cancelled. So in a sense, we've gained that.
Yeah.
And I'm not someone that usually cares for this kind of thing greatly, but seeing the sort of big creator community pull together for this was really quite something. The moment it was cancelled, there was a big Skype call going on between God knows how many of us, kind of going, well, here's something we could make, and here's something we could make, and maybe we could get a whole day of this together, or maybe it could be and all these ideas came around. That was all then passed on to the Robo Nerd team. They kind of settled on what they wanted and just made it happen. The energy behind it, the work behind it was incredible. And seeing that all come together was hugely satisfying.
I think Robo Nerd has the record for biggest portion of a live stream I've watched while it was being live streamed.
Bloody hell. That's quite something.
I normally don't have the patience to sit down and watch a live stream, but I did watch most of it in the end. It was, I think it was really good. Very well executed. And all the live, especially all of it was good, but like the live segments are always the bits that I would be nervous about doing. Like doing an interview live, how is that going to go? But they all went really well.
If there's one person I really felt for, it was Sam Elliott. You know, the man who can't even win a game of bingo. Being thrown in the deep end with Ian Lewis, live interview. My pants would be shat. Pants would be heavily, heavily shat if I had to do that.
Yeah, that was a big one.
And he nailed it as well. Everyone on the day just nailed their thing.
Yeah.
Craig and Joe especially, costume changes particularly on point. Just that the whole thing was... I'm so glad I was there rather than just watching it back. Yeah,
it was definitely nice being there and seeing all the stuff in the chat. For all the reasons that live streams are normally great, that I never really sort of fully get on board with. I don't know, because I think it's like a thing that I care about more than other stuff that would be live streamed, I guess. Or like I know a lot of the people involved in it, and I know recognise a lot of the names going through in the chat and stuff. So it's quite nice to sort of be involved and be a part of that conversation and see it all. It was good.
I guess we should also talk about our little hour of stuff.
Yeah.
That was quite the journey we went on with that interview, wasn't it?
Yeah, so like with many of those interviews, Sai messaged us and asked if we would be willing to interview someone. Didn't tell us who at first, and I think our response was, depends who it is. Because Ryan and I are not practiced or skilled interviewers. And yeah, when he was like, I'll put you in touch with Dave Mould, I was like, we'll give that a go. I think it's worth it.
We're like, yeah, we'll take that bullet for you, Si, don't worry.
We'll do our best there. Yeah, it definitely was a journey. It's really funny sort of doing that kind of stuff, because obviously we don't really make videos. We make podcasts. And adding the video element makes things a lot harder and a lot more complicated. So that made me a bit nervous. And we had like lots of long conversations about what we were going to do. Most of which we ended up not doing.
But the spirit of everything kind of remained, and I think led to the strengths that it had. Because we put quite a lot of time into thinking about the style of question we wanted to ask. And the broader topics that we wanted to cover. Because there are quite a few different ways you could approach something like this. We could have gone down a really sort of biographical road and tried to talk about, his start in the sport through the featherweight scene, his first heavyweight, and then on to the sort of televised stuff. We could have sort of framed it all specifically around Robot Wars or specifically around basketball. There were lots of approaches and we didn't really know which was right. So in the end, we fell back to the old faithful, what are we actually interested in? And just asked things that we wanted to know.
This is one of the guiding principles of Spinnerproof, is in general, we make the thing that we think is interesting, not necessarily what we think the rest of the world will think is interesting, which is a risky thing. When it pays off, I think it's quite good, but there are, you definitely run the risk of going down an interview style or something, asking questions that we might think are interesting, but is not necessarily the most interesting for a wider audience. I think we did quite well with that, though. I think in the end, if I can be proud of something that I've helped make, I think it went well. I think we struck a good balance of sort of more general stuff and also talking in a bit more. I don't feel that we dove particularly deep into technical elements of building or anything, which I still think would be interesting. But then there's also an element of I'm not sure I could keep up if I'm not sure either of us could keep up if Dave really went into building and stuff. But it was nice to sort of just scratch the surface of how to design and build a heavyweight as well.
Yeah, we could have been found out very quickly if we tried to get too technical. No, I'm really pleased that everything came out of it, and there were a couple of conversations in particular that really piqued my interest. The thing that struck me most was what he was saying about lightening components, not for the weight saving that can go into other things, but to kind of reduce their inertia in impacts as well.
Yeah.
Which seems like such an obvious thing now someone said it. But that was a full-on, mind-blown, we're playing checkers, you're playing chess kind of moment for me.
Yeah, that's some like real high-level optimization going on into that kind of stuff. And I think that is exactly the kind of attention to detail it takes to build, a championship-winning robot. Like to have a robot that is as successful as Carbide. I think you've got to be thinking about those details. And it's super cool sort of hearing about it. One of the things that really struck me was about the washer and the difference that can make. And again, it's it's one of those things that makes sense when you think about, these things aren't properly aligned or something like that can cause wear quite quickly. But it's also just amazing to think what the smallest possible component you can have go wrong or not be quite right in your robot, and the difference and the impact that can have on the performance of the robot in general.
For me, I think the key thing with that, as he was saying it, is I was just kind of looking into my phone screen at hello there and thinking, your rear wheel axles are literally bolts where the wheel hub just runs on the threads. It's like, what the hell are we doing?
Yeah, but it works. That was the other thing that he sort of said is that like Dave and Sam overthink stuff. And I think we are guilty of that to an extent. And I think there is definitely value in just going, well, what is the bare minimum that will work for the purposes of this? And I think that running your wheel hubs directly on threaded rods, while not ideal, is good enough to get a robot in the arena. And that's what's more important in the end.
The other thing I really enjoyed hearing was just his approach to competition and approach to losing.
Yeah.
Just that sort of really chilled acceptance of, well, if it's a good fight and if we learn something, it's all good.
Yeah. Which
is, I think, very much our way of thinking. But I've always assumed that was predicated on not winning.
Not only is this section of the podcast going to be, look at us, we made an into it. It's going to be, look at us, we're just like Dave.
Wait, you mean we're not?
Oh, dear.
No, I think it's really interesting that there are parallels between him as someone super successful and us as idiots. That interview, I hope, would give a lot of encouragement to people who've not been building very long.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with him on so much of that. Of like, yeah, like losing is where you learn the most. I think we've felt that with the small number of fights we've had. It is, I feel like we learn more from the fights that we've lost and where it's gone wrong.
I mean, to be fair, the fights we've won have been bullshit.
Yeah, we've won fights on technicalities more than actually winning the fights, I think. But yeah, there's definitely more to be learned from things going wrong, and I think it's also nice to see that that you can have a super competitive, like very successful robot, but still be sort of there having fun in the fights as well, of not being, and it not being, we must win and there's no fun to be had. Not that I think anyone is particularly like that, but that's definitely sort of a danger with like high level competitive stuff. And so I think it's good to see that there is still an element of like, we're here for a bit of a laugh, we're going to do what we're going to do, and hopefully it wins, but if it doesn't, then it doesn't.
That's the kind of attitude that made Rex Garrett a real hero of mine. And I'm really grateful that back then the producers were willing to show someone being that way. Whereas now, the sense we've got from watching the show and the sense we got from talking to Dave as well is that they'd rather have the successful people be kind of villainous figures and not show that side of them.
Yeah.
Because you have to imagine there was plenty of footage in Mentorn's archives of the team talking that way, reacting that way, just being chilled people about it all.
Yeah.
That they've gone, that doesn't tell the story we want.
They probably want underdogs, and in order to have an underdog, you've got to have a slightly villainous champion. So, yeah.
There was one point in the interview where I toyed with sort of sharing something with him that I decided against. which I'll share now because he's not here to defend himself. I remember one of the first conversations I had with sort of other friends about the Robot Wars reboot when it happened was with a really old friend of mine from secondary school. And the first thing he said was, I don't like that Carbide guy, he's nasty.
Oh, no.
And in a way, I'd love to know what Dave would have thought of that, but it was all because there was just one shot in Series 8 where I think they just smashed Nuts up. I can't quite remember what the order of it was, and they had Behemoth next. And there was this one little shot of Dave just walking up to Anthony Pritchard, just slapping him on the back and going, "You're next, mate," and sort of walking away chuckling, which apparently made him a bastard. It was like, horrible person. How dare he say that? So that's just people having a laugh behind the scenes. That's fine. That's clearly not done with any malice.
Yeah.
But as he says, put the right music behind it, and that is what people are going to take from it.
Yeah, TV, man. TV or any kind of filmed event. I felt a bit nervous about that kind of stuff with Bogglebots when we were before we were on it. It was something that I was conscious of. Not that I particularly, obviously the people who make Bogglebots are all lovely people and don't want to be stirring up drama. But yeah, it was something I was conscious of even at that scale.
I think I remember you being anxious about that going in, and I wasn't really worried because I sort of had a lot of confidence in them just not wanting to do it that way.
Yeah.
But I must admit there were moments where I went, maybe Sam is right. Maybe they might just decide to do that this time.
No, I think a lot of my anxiety around that stuff is rooted in my own insecurities about myself. I know that when I get into something, I can really get into it, and I can be very loud and competitive and sweary. And I didn't know. I was really worried that was going to come across in a bad way. Which I don't think it did. I think I got away with it.
Part of me now wants to see how badly they could have painted us with the footage they had.
Oh no, don't even entertain the idea. Don't do that, Joe. You're not allowed.
So I think if someone had been with us at SXS, like with a camera in our face in the pits, they'd probably been able to make at least me look like a right arsehole at points. I had some very stressed moments at SXS of just hating the robot and therefore hating everyone around me as well. Yeah.
It's funny, because I can think of a moment in the pits when it's like after our first fight and Kylo had eaten itself before we knew what had happened, and we sort of owned it up, and there were a few people looking over our shoulders and stuff. And I think at some point I did just sort of say, as politely as I could muster, but I'm really worried it came across really awfully, was like, can we just have a bit of time and space to look at this on our own, please? And I have no idea how polite that came across, but if anyone ever feels offended by it, please know that it's not my intent. Anyway, we've diverged very far from where this was meant to be. Once again, we've managed to make this all about us.
I mean, we can do that on this one.
We can. We're allowed.
This is ours anyway. We have full creative control. Well, let's be fair, we did for this as well.
Yeah,
Again, the freedom we were given to just make something good was brilliant to have.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think some kind of restraints and constraints are good. In some ways, it's sort of a bit like, it depends, right? So like if someone says, I'll make whatever, I'm sure it'll be good. If they mean that, that's great. If what they mean is, guess what I want you to make, that's really irritating. But I think Sai and all the people meant what they said, which was just like, make a thing and it'll be good. And so we made a thing.
I think I'd have had that anxiety if Sai hadn't said straight off, oh, I've watched this and this from you and really liked it. That made it a lot easier for me to go, okay, he knows what to expect. He's got a rough idea of the sort of thing we're going to produce. I'm mostly just so glad that it was more of a problem for me than you. I'm so glad that I was able to put time into setting my video up decently.
Yeah.
Because I must admit, that cold open annoys the hell out of me just because it's on crappy video.
Look, it's fine.
It's worth it. It's a good cold open.
It was the best opening I could find. I think the first few drafts were a different opening, and it never quite sat right for me. And I thought that, the one we ended up with, I think, felt more spinnerproof. What I wanted to do quickly, I don't know how much this sort of extends into what other people think the breakdown of work is in terms of who did what in this video. I'm concerned that you go around telling people that I put all the time into editing it, and I want people to know that Ryan did an enormous amount of work. both drafting the majority of the questions and also finding the clips. Like, people noticed the shot of Pussycat and Razor at the right time, and little jokes
Yeah,
like that. That's all Ryan. None of that is me. Ryan said, "Put this here; it'll be funny," and I did, and then it was funny. So I wanted to make that clear that Ryan, while I was the one with my hands on the keyboard and mouse, Ryan did a lot of the editing as well.
Something that I really wanted from this was for there to be a couple of things in there that were kind of just for people who already listen to us. So, like, the fact that we've got that clip of K2 versus Wayo with Sujin also there, just talking about a good fight. It's not there because it's good footage, it's just there because I constantly talk about that fight. It's just that little in reference was just enough for me, and there are a couple other little bits like that. And there are some things in there that are basically just jokes for other builders, like having the fry cook clip in there. It's like, it's not the best clip to show that point, but everyone bloody loves that fight. So it was really fun being able to squeeze those little bits in. What I would say on the breakdown of work is I think we put in pretty much the same hours on it. The difference is that anyone could have done the bits I did. Sorry, either one of us could have done the bits I did. Only you could have done that edit. Even though I already know you can edit very well, I was super impressed with what you came out with.
That's very kind.
Yeah, I think we did okay. I think everyone should now stop. They should pause the episode and give us a quick round of applause.
Oh, dear. It's funny, I kind of want to talk about the production of that video and stuff, but I don't really know what to say.
I'm happy to go into ludicrous depth on what we did if you want to.
I don't know. It's just like, I don't know. I don't know what there is to say about it other than it was a lot of work.
How much time do you reckon went into that whole thing?
Overall, I'm not sure. In terms of just editing the video, I spent every moment of free time that I wasn't at work editing the video for a week. I think I spent a good chunk of a Saturday and a Sunday, and then every evening for a work week after that, just editing the damn thing.
Okay, maybe we weren't quite even on hours spent then.
Because I had like problems the way we filmed it, I'm going to talk about it now, that's it. The way we filmed it was I had my microphone going into my computer and also my phone pointed at me for the video. Ryan had the same thing, and then we did the interview over Zoom, and Zoom lets you record meetings that you do, and it has quite cool features where it can record it onto separate tracks. So I had the video, which was everyone and everyone's audio, and then I also had Dave on one file that was just Dave's audio, which is really important for editing audio, that you have everyone on individual tracks, because once you've done that, you can edit out crosstalk and you can retime things to get reactions to work properly and all kinds of other little tricks to make it flow nicely. So we did that. I think if we had more time with Dave and more... So what would have been really nice would have been to get Dave to have a camera pointed at himself as well. That's really hard to ask someone to do because there's lots of things that can go wrong with that. Ryan's phone, for example, splits the recording into like 4 gigabyte chunks. And I've got experience with my GoPro doing that as well. My GoPro does it seamlessly and it works. Your phone, Ryan, doesn't do that seamlessly.
Yeah, it leaves a good 5-10 second gap, doesn't it?
Which is fine. Like in the context of this video, it was absolutely fine. But obviously, I have no idea what phone Dave has, and my phone, for whatever that's worth, doesn't do that at all. It will just record into one massive file. So I don't know what phone Dave's got, or what other kind of camera equipment he's got, and therefore I have no idea. Is it going to be a frame rate that's right? I don't want to be doing frame interpolation to try and get the frame rates to match. There's concerns about if it does it into chunks of video and it splits it and doesn't do that seamlessly. Dave is the one doing all the talking. It's much, much harder to hide that if it happens. And then so that's a big part of it. Then the other part is just uploading the files and stuff. You end up with a 5 or 6 gigabytes of data that you've got to try and upload somewhere, and that's a time-consuming thing to do. So it's really hard to ask someone who's busy, especially, to do all that kind of stuff. But what we ended up with in the end was like 5 or 6 like files that I had to sync up, like these 3 video files and all the 3 audio things. I had to sort of try and get all synced up with the master sort of like recording that came straight out of Zoom and stuff. And that ended up being much harder than I expected. Ryan's audio was always out of sync. Mine was out of sync in a place and I didn't spot it. I only spotted it during the live stream, and it annoys me that I didn't spot it.
I think I spotted that as well and chose not to say anything in the hope you hadn't.
Oh, so frustrating to have spent so long. It's interesting editing it, right? Because like for the most part, I'm editing to what's spoken. I'm looking at the timeline and the waveform more than I'm looking at the preview window. And so it's surprisingly hard to spot when something's out of sync unless I was sort of sat there watching, looking for it. And so I'm annoyed that I missed that one. But yeah, like getting all those things in sync was a bit of a nightmare. And then what I need to learn to do at some point is learn like the multicam features of my editing software, because I had it on like 3 different tracks. And so keeping it in sync while cutting stuff out was a bit of a pain in the neck. So yeah, one day I'll learn to do that properly. But that was fun. And then right towards the end is when we really noticed, there's problems with the audio. Like I'd done a lot of editing with slightly out of sync audio. And what I discovered was that Dave's audio was consistently 3 frames out of sync. Ryan's audio drifted depending on how far through the recording you were. It started fine, rapidly went out of sync, and then came back again a bit later on. And then mine drifted out and then came back about 2/3 of the way through. And just trying to deal with all that stuff, like audio, like syncing audio and video is a pain in the neck. So yeah, I think that was the bit of it that ended up feeling like this was bit off more than we could chew in some ways, in terms of like so many different sources of stuff to try and synchronize.
And also the time we gave ourselves in post-production. We cut it fairly fine.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to do it in anything other than the school holidays because work was a waking nightmare. And I was like, I can't do this on a normal weekend. That will end in a death. Yeah.
So yeah, that was fun. So yeah, trying to sort of like, and then trying to fix that sync, like Dave's audio being 3 frames out of sync, trying to fix that after you've done the edit meant I ended up having to sort of go through and manually look at something like 200 clips on the timeline. I didn't enjoy that bit of it.
So what you're saying is you have a greater understanding of why most people making podcasts and YouTube things just straight up record a Skype call and then edit that because they value their time more than you value your time.
I feel a bit bad talking about this kind of stuff sometimes. I think it was time well spent to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it is worth,
especially as a one-off for an event like this, 100%.
I do think it is worth getting everyone on their own track and getting everyone's video sort of like isolated in some way and being able to do something with that. But it is incredibly time consuming.
So basically what we're saying is don't expect many more of these.
Yeah, we're not becoming YouTubers. Editing video. Okay, right.
I'm getting
Ryan's becoming a YouTuber, but I will say that editing video in the style that I want is immensely time consuming, and so don't expect it very often.
Wow, we've ended that on a real negative, haven't we? That was great conversation structuring from the two of us.
Well,
that's how we made it where we are today. What
would be a positive? I was really pleased with the way that interview was received. I really appreciated the comments, like in the chat, people noticed the editing, and I can't tell you how happy that made me. One person, I think, said this is well edited, and I was like, that was worth it. That made everything worth it. That someone noticed really means so much. So yeah, I think it went well. Anyway, we should probably move on.
We should move on to what is actually not the bulk of this episode. We want to get a bit more Ratunkty done.
Yeah.
Just throwing it on the end here, you know. Feels strange to transition into, but we can. I haven't reviewed any of these notes since I made them.
Oh, we're starting with a corker here as well. This is going to be great.
Oh, precedents have been set with this one. You ready to go straight into it?
Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, no. I'm just okay, right then. Let's do it.
So, Vulture versus Iron Ore 6. Iron Ore 6, one of the only robots that I specifically called out in the rules, and I'm now really anxious that I called them out in the rules and we've done the opposite of what I said we would do in the rules. So I'm just going to quickly check that while you talk.
So, well, what can I say? Iron Ore 6, the robot with a flipper that we've never seen working, except that the notes here say that we are assuming the flipper does work because we've seen it work in live events. And I'm not sure if that's good enough.
You won't take direct evidence of the robot working just in another physical location.
Well, is this not the bit that you're worried about with the rules? Well, I can't remember what your rules were, but I wonder if it had to be on television that we've seen it work.
So in the rules where I'm talking about robots failing to work on TV, I used Iron Ore as the example. And I've said Iron Ore 6's flipper has worked in live events, so would be assumed to work. Whereas... I'll read this, but I'll do so with a level of apology to Craig Danby. Whereas Foxic has never really performed better than it did on Robot Wars.
Oh, poor Craig.
Oh, God, I got really specific in the rules.
Really?
Cop a load of this. General patterns of reliability are, however, accounted for as a secondary consideration. That's fine so far. Worth no more than 1 point in odds. That's gone out the window, hasn't it? That's long gone. I love that I thought I was going to be able to enforce all of this.
Well, I wonder, like, how much had we been talking about the judging criteria in televised events when you wrote these rules? Like, were you being like, I'm going to show the world how it's done?
That's pretty much what was happening, I think, yeah. But the main takeaway here is that Iron Ore 6's flipper works. And we now have to deal with that.
Excellent.
Have fun. While we're talking live scene for Iron Ore 6, it is worth pointing out that it's done very well.
Yeah.
It's won events. It's come third in the UK Heavyweight Champs a couple of times. It's a good flipper when it hasn't got a camera pointed at it. So unless we're sort of taking stage fright into account here, I think it has to have a good chance in this fight.
Is that not a general pattern of reliability, though?
Yeah, but that's worth no more than 1 point. As we all know. It's tricky, though, because when I write up a competitive record, it only includes the televised stuff, because that's what you can get information for. And when you look at that, it's not pretty reading.
No.
They got through the melee with Tauron and the kegs because Tauron got stuck. The Androne fight was just a robot that couldn't really do anything to it, even though it was just a wedge at that point. The even record it has in televised composition is so generous.
Yeah, that's a really tough one to judge, because like I feel like when it's working, I feel like it should do pretty well in this fight. Maybe. I can't remember how powerful Vulture's weapon is. I suspect not very.
It's fine. It's designed to exploit weak top armour, which is something that Iron Ore kind of doesn't have. I do wonder, however, if the sort of wedge-lit fork things are going to prove to be a big issue for Iron Ore to get under. Because they seem like they should do well in terms of ground clearance.
I don't know, like, because they're not hinged at all, so I don't know that they necessarily do any better than just having a generally low front end. I suppose because there are 3 different points, they can maybe not, you know, as compared to just like a one single wide edge to try and keep on the floor. I don't know. I don't know how much of a difference that kind of stuff makes, really, if it's not hinged.
I think they're hinged in the sense that they're slightly loosely mounted so that they can ride along the floor.
Citation needed.
That's just how they look to me, you know? And I know that is an approach that people have used.
Okay.
The key issue for me is that I'm not sure what Vulture can do offensively to Iron Ore 6. It's a pretty sturdily shelled machine. Plus, you know, we have entanglement to deal with here.
Oh, of course, entanglement. Everyone's favourite addition to the rules.
Hang on, are we allowing entanglement? I'm going to have to check the rules again, damn it. Fortunately, I've already got the page open on my phone, so that's good. Entanglement is not allowed in either arena or rule set. There we go. Screw you, entanglement. Get out of here. You were always a silly rule.
So they've just got these red tubes on the side of the robot for nothing.
Style points.
Of course, yes. I'm sorry that style was a big part of the judging criteria.
Not as in style points with the judges. Style points with just everyone who's looking. You got to look good to work good.
No,
that's how it works.
This would look better without those red pipes.
What if they were pink instead?
I mean, that would be an improvement.
Well, let's see if I can change the colour settings then.
Consider this. lose the pipes, paint the whole robot pink.
I'm sold. 6 and 1 to Vulture.
What do you actually want to score? What do you actually? I don't know. I don't know if I'm being harsh on Vulture, but I feel like Iron Ore probably has a bit of an advantage. Maybe, I don't know.
4-3 or 5-2 is the question.
This is really tricky, right? Because I think I can't remember at all at this point how well Vulture really performed, and I feel like this idea of a robot should do quite well. Like an ideal version of this robot should be Iron Ore, in my opinion. But
really,
yeah, because it can do the damage.
If you were talking like a modern saw blade or something, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like the more ideal form of this idea of an overhead spinning weapon and stuff, I think could be quite good. But I don't want to underrate that. But I'm also, the fact that I can't really remember Vulture very well suggests that it didn't really do very well and didn't perform in a particularly exciting way. So I don't know.
It had weapon reliability problems, which were almost entirely based on being hit repeatedly in the weapon mechanism by terahertz in the 2 fights they lost. So it is a hard one to judge.
Yeah.
I think it's a very lightweight spinner.
Yeah.
It is not designed for high energy output. It's designed to damage weak spots, or honestly, just to be a cool and different thing at the time, which I think is perfectly worthy.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But doesn't necessarily make it a winner of this fight. I'd be happy to go 5-2. It's a wedge flipper in the Robot Wars arena.
Yeah, you're right. I was going to try and make an argument for 4 and 3, but you're right.
And there was me thinking I was agreeing with you by going 5-2.
5 and 2 it is.
Any 4 and 3 averted is a good thing in my eyes.
Okay. Right.
So 1 and 2 for Vulture, the rest for Iron Ore 6?
Sure. It is. Can you guess it?
I mean, it'd be great if it was a 6, wouldn't it?
It's a 4.
Good enough.
Good enough.
I think that could be the last vaguely close one for a while.
Up next, we have Rapid versus Sub-Zero. And I noticed that we've specified Series 10, Rapid, I assume.
Most recent, pretty much, yeah. Although, I feel like we could combine if we wanted to. But because the Series 9 version had to retire based on, one hit to the side, I think it's better for Rapid that we just take Series 10.
My recollection is that they were quite different as well.
They were the same overall concept of wedge flipper that is very expensive, and that's all we talk about.
I forget how much I love what this robot looks like. It's like there is something so deeply satisfying about precision machined parts just fitting together nicely with consistent gaps between the things and stuff. Like, I think this is a wonderfully made robot. I know that it costs a small fortune, but it is wonderful.
Did it though? Did it cost a small fortune, or did the BBC do their old trick of account for every cost that possibly could have been incurred if you were making this from scratch with no equipment?
Yeah, I also wonder how is it significantly more expensive than other robots that are there, or is it technically the most expensive by like £5 or something?
Another team was going to be more expensive, so they just threw a tenner in.
I suspect that also, like, if you were going to try and sort of like figure out how much this cost, I suspect they didn't cost the people building it that much money because yeah, they are like a full like prototyping company or something. Like, they have all the equipment and the stuff for machining this stuff anyway. So I think in terms of if an individual were going to go and buy the time to machine some of these parts, maybe it costs some silly sum of money. But for the company doing it, I imagine it's tiny. Worth it though. I do think it's amazing.
Whichever version of Rapid you take, it's a very good flipper. We're going to take the Series 10 one because it was the one that was reliable, basically.
Yeah.
And the one that we saw more of, so it's an all-round good choice to have taken it. And of course, if the team want to finally make good on that claim of throwing a transit van 1 metre in the air, I'm all ears. Although, I'd like to watch it rather than listen to it, I suppose.
You're all eyes. That'll be another technicality thing, won't it? Be like if you had like a point mass that weighed as much as the transit van, it could throw it 1 metre in the air.
In a vacuum,
yeah. As is often the way with these things.
With Sub-Zero, we have our first reminder that 2019 BattleBots happened after Eternity started. Therefore, we're looking at old school Sub-Zero that looks like a dog cocking its leg.
Oh dear. Sub-Zero with its exposed welding.
Insane durability, to be fair to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing you can never take away. But offensive capability as a flipper, not sure we ever really saw what it could do.
No, I don't feel like we've ever had particularly high praise for this robot.
I've always been genuinely impressed by the beatings it can take. That, I think, is always an underrated quality in a robot. Admittedly, taking huge to a judge's decision while taking a pummeling isn't that rare, but they did that and they did it well. The win they had against Shredderator, they earned purely through that reliability, which is a valid way to win, especially against Shredderator. Minotaur, I think, was a KO, but even then, they took some hits. So as a machine to provide some entertainment on TV, Sub-Zero's pretty good. As a machine to fight rapid in the Robot Wars arena, probably less suited.
Yeah. For me at least, one of the fundamental problems that Sub-Zero has is that it looks too much like Bronco and isn't as good as Bronco. Or at least doesn't have...
Are you thinking of the modern Sub-Zero there, though? Or do you think that this one also looks quite Bronco-y?
So this one is close enough because of just the way that weapon works. And I know that this is not unique to Bronco, this style of flipper. I know that other robots have done it. But like for me, like Bronco is the robot that has this iconic shape of weapon. And so it's sort of like whenever you see another... It's like anyone trying to do a Crusher. It's like, well, you're just immediately going to be compared to Razor for me. Even if other robots have maybe done it better or did it before Razor, I don't know. But like, it's just sort of like, that's just the shape it has.
I've just understood your comparison better after moving the Skype window that was covering the 2016 version on my screen. I was only looking at the 2018 version where the pivot point's much further forwards. Yeah, you're completely right. That's very Bronco-y.
Even with it further forwards, it's still reminiscent. I think that's a lot further from Bronco, obviously, but like it's still quite reminiscent of it. But anyway.
It's basically just Bronco but wrong at that point, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, so we've looked at Bronco, we've worked out what makes it tick, and we've not done any of that.
No, what's happened is someone's copied Bronco, but from an image with the wrong aspect ratio.
This is on the verge of the "can I copy your homework" meme. And no, I'm not making that.
But trying
to drag this kicking and screaming back onto topic, it's made of ground clearance. I'm not sure it self-rights very effectively or quickly. When it does self-right, it self-rights in a really predictable way that would make it easy for Rapid to get straight back in position to reflip them. I don't see any good coming of this for Sub-Zero.
No.
So I think you know what I'm going to say.
Do I? Are you gonna claim that this is a 6-1?
I am. How does that make you feel?
Go on then. For the record, I'd be happy with a 5-2 as well.
Sell me on a 5-2.
Well, I don't want to be too harsh to Sub-Zero.
This is going to sound weird. I feel better being harsh to Sub-Zero here because it's not the modern version. If they were still running this machine, I'd feel bad. But because they've completely redesigned it and had more success out of it, I kind of feel like I've got more permission to give a 6-1 without feeling too bad.
Justified in poo-pooing it.
I personally deem that guilt is not a good enough reason for this to be a 5-2.
No, I think that's valid. I can't really think of a convincing argument to make this more in Sub-Zero's favour. So we'll go with 6-1.
It's going to be a 7 now, isn't it?
I hope so. Are you ready?
Always.
Ho, 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 ho.
So that's not a 7 then.
We have a 2.
Following that incredibly close battle, we have Invader versus 2018 Witch Doctor. Because again, 2019 Witch Doctor was not available. I'm going to stay completely silent and let you work this one out for yourself.
Should we just roll the dice with a 6-1 in favour of Witch Doctor?
I think that's the safest thing from my point of view.
I don't think there's
Let's do that.
There's not a lot to discuss here, is there?
Hang on, can I just point out? On every slide for the robots, I've got their name, a picture, their competitive record, and then any notes from the discussion that we had previously. My note for Invader is the apex of odds of 3 and 3 because we couldn't make them both lose.
Is Invader one of the robots that people have not had a go at us, but like called us out on underrating at some point?
I should hope not, because in its only appearance, it shat the bed.
Right, I'm just going to roll the dice.
And couldn't be shut off. They had to wait for the batteries to die down until it started spinning slow enough that someone could go in with a crowbar and stop it. Or a pry bar, technically.
Okay, well, let's hope it's not a 1.
I mean, if it is, it could be funny.
It's a 2.
That's close. That's already close.
Even Witch Doctor struggled to stop it.
I mean, it's interesting because as far as, if I remember rightly, and I could be getting this very wrong and embarrassing myself, Invader is basically megabyte, which is basically gigabyte, which Witch Doctor in 2019 absolutely pummeled. But I wouldn't necessarily have backed 2018 Witch Doctor to do it.
Well, here we are.
It would have at least had some wheels randomly fall off. And that's as much Witch Doctor bashing as I dare do. Well, 2018 Witch Doctor bashing. 2019 version, I wouldn't bash.
I wonder if I stay silent for long enough, will you just start bashing Witch Doctor to fill the dead air?
Yes, I would, which is why you mustn't do that.
Right then, well, we'll move on. We have Razorback versus Complete Control.
This, to me, feels like a fight that's close for good reasons.
Why is there a picture of Sub-Zero in the notes?
There isn't a picture of Sub-Zero in the notes. I don't know what you're talking about. You may be hallucinating. Seek medical help.
Oh, dear. Oh, Razorback looks like a very BattleBots robot, doesn't it?
In the grabber configuration that you've got on your screen, absolutely. In the drum configuration, it's a little more... Although I guess in the drum configuration, it's a 4-wheel drive vertical spinner, which is also very BattleBots. What configuration of Razorback do we want to use against Complete Control?
I don't know, man. What would you do? What would be the... I'd be inclined to go in with the grabber.
I've just noticed that they did beat Complete Control in a whiteboard using the vertical spinner, which was more sort of bar or disc in Season 1.
Well, I'd still go in with the grabber. I'm going to stick to my guns here. I feel like with the grabber, you've got more recourse if Complete Control grabs you to sort of like adjust your robot's shape and try and free yourself.
More wiggle ability to get free.
Exactly.
It's a very defensive way of thinking, though.
Well, you know me.
Cowardly, some might say.
A defensive and cowardly person. I'd never drive headfirst into a robot with an offensive weapon.
Because there's absolutely no other plan that works for you.
Look, as we've discussed before, I'm incapable of doing anything else.
My logic coming into this was that they would go with the drum for damage output. Because I question whether they would out-aggress and out-control the out-and-out lifter. But your argument for the grabber is pretty convincing.
It's one of those things. I think it'd be glorious if that worked. I mean, I'd go with the grabber partly for that, and just because I like more unique-looking robots. I just think it's sort of like that's like the prime configuration for Razorback. I would say. I don't know how the builders feel about it, but like if I'd built it, I'd be like, this is the prime configuration, and the drum is a compromise. And so I'm always in favour of like just go in with the robot that you built. But yeah, I can also see I think the drum is probably more likely to maybe do something. I guess in the rock paper scissors analogy, I feel like going in with 2 papers is maybe not worth the time.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because I just realised that I forgot to bring it up when we were talking about the Dave Moult interview. Thank you for doing that.
Look, this is a well-established analogy for robot combat, and it works well.
The thing is, in the rock, paper, scissors analogy, drums struggle against things with forks. That's not really part of it, but you know what I mean. That's a bad crowbarring of the term. Because Razorback would be a drum with no real feeder setup, I would say that the lifter setup... I'm really taking this slowly, I don't know why. The lifter setup of Complete Control has an advantage over it because it's not going to get in and engage properly. And I think Razorback can take the low ground back by running this grabber setup. And I think that is what they would do. You've persuaded me despite seemingly de-persuading yourself.
Excellent. Let's go with that then. 2 grabbers.
The difference, of course, being that Complete Control has a grabber plus fire.
Plus glorious, glorious fire.
When you look at Razorback, it seems like it should be the more mobile and pushy machine, but I don't know how true that is. Complete Control just happens to cover its wheels. Internally, it could be very similar drive-wise. It's just a bit jankier looking.
Yeah. I think Complete Control's lifter is a better design than Razorback. So I think it's probably more able to lift stuff and more stable once it's done it than Razorback. Maybe.
Maybe the thing this comes down to is whether we think it's viable for Razorback to flip Complete Control. Because I'm not certain that Complete Control was able to self-right reliably. I'm also not certain that they weren't.
Yeah, I think if Razorback gets a good grab, I assume that the grabber on it is capable of doing 360. I mean, it looks like it is from that picture, so I assume it could flip it by just tossing it over its back. So assuming it could get a grip on it, I think that would probably be a thing. The counter argument here is I think if Complete Control gets a good grip and then gets that flamethrower on it, like we've seen the amount of damage that can do. Like, you could absolutely see that disabling Razorback with a single grab if they get it right.
I was thinking about that earlier when we were talking weapon. And one other advantage the grabber would have for Razorback is that if they get grabbed, it's likely to be front to front. And that weapon setup is almost a big heat sink that's far away from the major electronics.
Yeah, I can see that.
But then even if Complete Control was able to disable the weapon module that way, that would be enough on damage to likely take the inevitable judge's decision. So we have a win condition for each in that respect.
This is tricky.
It's a tough one, isn't it?
Because I think that Razorback has a better win record, but I also feel like Complete Control has the much more iconic and memorable win.
And the more iconic and memorable loss.
Yeah.
It's worth saying that with Razorback's record, modern day, I think the Sawblaze judge's decision goes against them. So that kind of evens things out a bit. Well, let's be honest, things are even anyway. Competitively, it's 2-2 versus 1-1.
Yeah, I think this is a really close fight, I think.
1-1, by the way, because we're only looking at the 2016 Complete Control before people get confused. Didn't make that very overt. Would it help to think about how they got here? Because they both had some pretty big results. Complete Control beat Overdoser, the wooden robot. And Razorback, oh boy, Razorback took on the might of Frostbite.
Oh dear. Using the drum, why on earth? Why did we decide that?
Because easy damage to a very weak machine. And because I wanted to see it retired, not just beaten.
I don't really know. I can't even sort of like bring myself to pick an advantage here.
Well, that's a problem.
It is a problem. I almost want to. I prefer Razorback, but I think that's purely because I think it just looks like a much cooler robot.
That's an even bigger problem because I was going to err slightly towards Complete Control.
Oh no! Oh dear. I mean, Complete Control is also a cool looking robot.
It's the more effective weapon, but the less effective body. It's big, it's clunky, it's a weird shape. And that makes it seem like it would be less manoeuvrable, even though that may not be true. Complete Control is very optimised to face spinners, rather than all of the other designs. And I'm not saying that's a bad choice. Razorback has the greater potential for a KO, but in a judge's decision, you'd expect it to go Complete Control's way if they do any damage, and the judge's decision seems more likely than a KO. So I was trying to talk myself around to Razorback and couldn't. See what? In both of us, in our heads, we're going to decide on a scale of 1 to 5 how certain we are that our robot should have the edge.
Why? Where's this going to go?
And then we'll compare those numbers.
When we both say 5, what do we do?
Well, that's not going to happen, I can assure you. Have you got a number in your head?
Can Complete Control self-right? That's what it comes down to for me.
Do you want to go look it up?
Well, I'm going to try and look it up, but I don't really know what I can. What can you Google that would give an answer to this?
To the wiki.
Bear with while I just turn off all the cookies.
So on the Complete Control wiki page, I'm going to start Control Fing for some terms. So let's go self of self-right. No. Let's go right of self-right. No. I would hope I had the things expanded because I'm on mobile.
It's not clear on the wiki, but earlier versions were modified to improve the self-writing. So I suspect that Complete Control can do it. I think that Derek is aware of that and will have refined it such that it can self-right.
I feel like it will self-right from some positions. It looks to me like there's a very stable position kind of on its side where I would be surprised if it did. But as you say, this is something that people design for. So maybe it's harsh to assume it can't.
Here's the thing, right? If Complete Control can't self-right, I would give it in favour of Razorback. If it can self-right, I think that it's much closer. And I think, like you sort of said earlier, I think it's more likely to go to a judge's decision. And then with that, I think Complete Control is more likely to have damage points from the flamethrower. And now I'm concerned that we're going to get shouted at for giving Razorback the grabber rather than the vertical spinner.
I still think it's the right thing to go in with. Although I guess if they were worried about being able to have KO potential, they would go with the spinner. Although, again, I think the spinner would get them into more trouble by not having the good feeder system. I'm going to check some images of that setup just to be sure that it's as bad for that as I remember it being. So looking at their drum setup in particular, they don't seem to have done anything with forks or anything else for ground clearance.
Yeah, right. We're going to stick with the grabber. Comments be damned.
Oh, also with the other vert setup, no feeder. So if I'm that team, I'm thinking about avoiding being picked up more than I'm thinking about my damage output.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just a sort of consequence of my approach, but that's where I'm leaning.
If you are currently writing a tweet to us, having a go at us for not choosing the spinner, then we don't care. Please don't do that.
So are we saying 4 and 3 in Complete Control's favour?
I think so, but I want Razorback to win.
Fair. So 1, 2, 3 for Razorback, 4, 5, 6, 7 for Complete Control.
Yeah. It's a 6.
Oh, it's a 6.
It's a 6.
Another day without upsets.
No upsets. How unfortunate.
It is really. We've enjoyed some very big upsets. I feel like maybe they're just more memorable. I feel like we get more upsets on the more extreme odds. We've broken maths.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
Wow.
I suppose we're done. Yeah.
I haven't had that voice for a
I don't know
while.
what prompted that. I have no idea what episode we're on.
I want to say 79, but I will check.
You are correct.
You have already checked.
Well, you can find the show notes for this episode at spinnerproof.com/episodes/79. And there you can find links to all the stuff we've been talking about today. You can also find a link to our Twitter at Spinnerproof, where you can not tweet to us everything we got wrong in this round of Retunti.